Hello and welcome to the CX Files for March 26th, 2026. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, and usually I'm in Montreal, but today I am back in London, which I consider to be almost like my second residence or my second city of residence. The way I don't know, it's just our industry is so centered around the UK and London as a base of operations. It's great to get back, great to see friends, great to find out what's going on in the industry over here, which is truly one of the most dynamic anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. And I think that we've got a guest this week that you talked to from a new country for the pod. Because I don't think we've ever had anybody from New Zealand before.
No, Melanie Disse, who runs Melanie Disse Consulting, is a fascinating individual. I've been following her on LinkedIn for quite some time, and we had the chance to start interacting last year. Melanie comes to our industry with a very well-rounded view from the standpoint of CX technology, CX culture, what it takes to drive good customer experience. Now, she's originally from Germany, but has lived in New Zealand for quite some time. And I really appreciate Melanie's international view of things. She's got a very wide-ranging perspective when it comes to our sector, which is refreshing. Because in a lot of cases, Mark, you and I both know when you speak to experts on a particular country or a particular region, Melanie has got the incredible advantage of being able to figure out exactly what's going on in a situation and apply different lessons from her observations in different parts of the world. So it was a real coup to bring her on. And we're talking a little bit about insights and the ability to leverage insights from consumers and to drive great CX that way. This has always been something that I've been passionate about, if I can use that word. You know, the reality is a lot of information is collected, but what's done with that information, I think in many cases by organizations, they're not leveraging it the way they could. And Melanie talks to us a little bit today about what can be done in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of the time we just see a sort of tick box exercise. Was the customer happy, yes or no? And then they kind of move on. But I think that where you see really good examples of companies that listen to what customers are saying, it's almost becomes like a sort of R&D department in its own right, because they can end up defining entirely new products.
Yeah, exactly. Entirely new products, entirely new services. But the key is to actually understand A, what information you're collecting it, why you're collecting it, and then figure out what you can actually do with it. And, one of the things that Melly and I touched on was the fact that I think a lot of consumers are quite cynical about this information when they're being asked to complete a survey at the end of a call or to complete an online survey at the end of a digital interaction. In many cases, I really think that we as customers have become cynical about why this information is being collected and what actually is going to be done with it. And that comes down to many enterprises that have just chosen to perhaps go through a lip service element to collect this type of data and just not do anything with it. Smart organizations actually collect the data, analyze it, and then come up with a strategy in terms of how to move forward on the back of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone who wants a great example of that should just look at the Lego toy company, who engage with their customers all the time, ask them for new ideas, new kinds of toys that they would like, and they become realities. Anything that a customer suggests that actually then gets support from other customers can end up being rolled out as a brand new toy. So it's a great example of not only engaging your customers, but listening to them.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I mean, look at the innovation Lego has brought to the table as a toy manufacturer. When I think a little bit about the toys that you and I would have had from Lego going back into the 1970s, who would have thought about some of the designs that they brought to the table that are engaging not just kids, but adults as well. It goes to show, collect the feedback, use the feedback to innovate, and business will keep coming and it'll grow.
Absolutely. So let's go to the interview with Melanie Disse in New Zealand.
A very, very big welcome to all of our listeners on the CX Files today. This is going to be a really fascinating discussion because not just about the topic, but the individual who I'm going to be speaking with as well. And that individual is Melanie Disse, who is the founder and principal consultant at Melanie Disse Consulting. Melanie, welcome to our show. And can you just let our listeners in on where you're joining us from today?
Absolutely. My pleasure, Peter. And thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. I'm joining from New Zealand. Was born in Germany, but I've been in New Zealand for the last 17 years, and that's where I'm joining from today.
That's fantastic. And I think you are actually our first guest from New Zealand in the entire 404 or 405 episodes of the CX Files. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Well, that's great. About time we hear some voices from New Zealand as well.
I agree with you. I agree with you. It's funny. We pride ourselves at the CX Files to be as international as possible. It's easy for a lot of people to go down a rabbit hole within one country or a couple of countries, but the reality is CX is taking so many different forms in different parts of the world. And what I love to do is uncover a little bit about what some of the nuances are, location by location, country by country, that may compare or contrast with what might be happening, say, with me here in Canada.
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe, but we've got a very interesting topic, but you've just piqued my interest. I've had a light bulb go on over my head. As somebody who is originally from Germany, but as you say, has been living nearly 2 decades in New Zealand, if you were to give a comparison on the CX dynamics, say, between Germany and New Zealand, what would be the similarities? What would be the differences?
That's a good question. And to be fair, I didn't actually work in CX when I was still in Germany. I came over as a student to New Zealand. But I have been in touch with some of my colleagues from Europe, including Switzerland and Germany as well. So I think it's a little bit different in New Zealand. We're a little bit of a smaller market. So sometimes we see a little bit more openness to experiment and play around with things. I think Germany in particular is a very regulated and restricted country, so everything's a little bit more difficult. In New Zealand, we are a little bit more nimble, which makes it easier to test, especially when we talk about technology. And from a customer experience, a customer service perspective, New Zealand is also different in the way that I think New Zealanders in general have a lot more empathy for customers or for other people in general. Germans can be very much ruled by regulations and laws, and Germans don't always have the reputation to be the most customer friendly or customer service a focused nation in the world. So there's definitely some differences we can see in terms of how customer experience, especially in a service, comes through, but then also around getting things done and established, especially on the technology side, that I think can be quite different.
It's interesting because I frequently travel to Germany. You and I have talked about this. It's one of my favorite countries in the world. And I have always actually found that there's almost like an underestimation about how friendly and customer service friendly people are when you are on the ground in Germany. I find that individuals go out of their way. There's definitely, I think, a focus on processes and following rules, but I've always spoken extremely highly of the service that I've gotten as a traveler or as a consumer in Germany. It's always been fantastic. But listen, we're
It
here
might be the
today to.
tourism industry. It might be the tourism industry, especially when you were dealing with government. It's quite different. But yeah, it's
Well,
good to hear that there are some positive examples out there.
absolutely, absolutely. And as at the time of recording, I'm actually planning to fly to Germany in a couple of days as well for
Good.
CCW Berlin. So I'm going to be getting another dose of German hospitality, which I can't wait. And
Perfect.
the
You can
Hofbrauhaus.
report back on.
That's it. The Hofbrauhaus by Alexanderplatz will be one of my first destinations, but that's
Oh,
another
good,
story
good,
for
good.
another day. So, Melanie, down to brass tacks. The reason that we're chatting today is because I got in touch with you last year to see if you joined the podcast for an interview because I love the content you put on LinkedIn. I love your points of view. They're very well thought out. And I know that one of your passions in our industry is leveraging customer insight. And that's always been something I think has been a major, major component of driving good CX. Now, I think one of the key things I've picked up on in my 2.5 decades in this industry is that customer insights are probably really, it's like the gold standard of what you should be looking for in regards to how better to manage CX inputs in
Mhm.
terms of how you can develop your strategy. But I also have the sense that in a lot of cases, enterprises just don't seem to be leveraging these data points or these thoughts of customers that they're able to share the way they could be. In fact, one of the things that we do in our annual buyer survey is that we sound the market on the extent to which
Mhm.
organizations are actually enabling themselves to pick these insights up. And it's actually incredible when you take a look at how underinvested so many of them are in being able to collect and analyze customer insights. So why is this the case?
Yes, that's a great question. It's a good question to kick it off as well. So I think when we talk about customer insights, there are a few challenges around why organizations may struggle to really leverage them to the fullest. And I think the first one really is a lack of understanding around what it actually is that we call customer insights, or what customer insights actually are and how they show up in the business. So traditionally, we think of surveys or research, right? We go out, we ask the customer, and then we get feedback and we consider that customer insights. And that is obviously a really important part of what makes up your customer insights repertoire. But there's a lot of other data sources we can now tap into that we consider raw customer feedback that we convert into insights. So the contact center, for example, is a treasure trove of customer insights. I really love the contact center for their richness of data. Every single phone call, chat, conversation, complaint, whatever it might be, any interaction or conversation that comes into the contact center is actually a source of raw customer feedback, which we can use for insights. And I think a lot of organizations still need to get their head around what that actually means. The same for social media and online reviews. There are a lot more data sources these days that we can tap into and utilize for insights. So I think the first challenge is really having that mindset around being restricted to surveys and research in particular. And then with that also comes, with those sort of new data sources, comes quite a new challenge for organizations as well. So if you have your head around the idea that feedback can come from different sources, then all of a sudden you have the challenge that the people who hear the feedback may not actually be the ones who can really act on it as well. So usually when we talk about customer insights, they come through either the contact center or through insights teams, right? So those are the teams that hear about them, but they're not necessarily the ones who, A, created the problem in the first place, or the challenge, and secondly, not the ones who can actually fix it. So we get some challenges at our hand from a insights perspective across organizations.
But this, I think, leads to a really interesting question, and that revolves around, as you say, take the contact center. A few years ago, it used to be you had one, maybe two channels. You had voice, you maybe had email, a little bit of web chat. But now, literally, you can have 8 to 9 different channels that you're able to collate information around or insights around. And imagine you're like probably many other customers in the world where you use the phone, you use email, you use chat, you might interact on social media. Marrying up one consumer across different channels to try and mine those insights is a major challenge. And it's something that I hear about from a lot of my friends who are running contact centers. There's almost a sense of being overwhelmed with not just the insights you can collect, but overwhelmed at the task of actually being able to reconcile so many different sources alongside the need to try and get a clear view about who that consumer actually is.
Yes, it's a really interesting challenge. So when I work with organizations in that space, that is really one of the conversations we have. What technology do we actually use? How can we make sense of all that data that comes from different sources, maybe even from different teams? So, if I just mentioned the insights team, you can also have marketing or product teams who have surveys going out or have digital analytics. Then you obviously have the contact center. So you get lots of different teams within the business who all receive some sort of customer feedback, but it usually sits in different teams and also sits in different systems. And that's a challenge, because if it sits in siloed systems, it's really hard for us to really analyze it to the best in the best way possible and get the richness of insights. So that technology challenge is an interesting one, and it's also becoming a lot more a lot more obvious now, because a lot of the data that's coming in is unstructured in nature. So analyzing that unstructured nature, it requires still a different type of technology than we traditionally used for customer insights. And so the contact center typically, within the CCaaS platform, there's some technologies to analyze transcripts and, chat and email and all those conversations. Within voice of customer programs or in insights teams, they have their own technology to do that. So there are different types of technologies that we can use to leverage that data, but also to bring it together and unify it in the first place is a big challenge. And I think from an organization perspective, we really need to think about how do we break down those silos, those technology silos, but also those departmental silos. If feedback is stuck in different teams and different systems, we're really not getting the most out of it. And that's a conversation I have quite regularly with organizations, how to actually go about resolving that so that everyone in the organization has the insights they need to do whatever they need to do to help us improve the customer experience.
But I think that you're touching on something that deserves a little more time to dive into. I am really curious from the standpoint of the tools that are out there, Melanie. You referenced what the tools that can be done in terms of cleaning the data and making sure that you've got a clear line of sight around each consumer. In the past, I think there's been an unwillingness on the part of many enterprises or enterprise CX leaders to even look at this, with the fear that this is going to be hyper expensive, that it's going to be very difficult to manipulate, to manage. You're going to need a PhD in engineering to actually make these things work. Think about the Excel formulas from like 20 years ago and so forth, that only a few people in the office knew how to do it, and boy, were they in demand. But I have a sense now that this technology is more accessible, both from an ease of use standpoint and from a cost standpoint. Am I right on that? Is there any excuse now not to be investing in these technologies?
Yes, so it's definitely becoming easier. When was ChatGPT released? Was it 2022 or 2023? So with those large language models becoming more available for organizations to play around with and leveraging unstructured data, those models are also utilized by vendors to help us analyze unstructured data, right? So we moved from a stage where usually technology was the challenge for us to analyze unstructured data to stage now we have lots of different types of technology to help us leverage that data. So analyzing unstructured data has become a lot easier, a lot faster, and more affordable as well than it used to be. So now the challenge is, now we have lots of different tools who do similar or the same job. So how do we go about that? If you're a CX leader within your organization, how do you decide which tool to actually use? Because the contact center has some great technology there. Is sometimes within their larger platforms, or sometimes it's conversation intelligence, standalone products. They analyze those conversations that come into the contact center. They tell you what the problem is. They tell you what went wrong. They tell you what the customer wants. They tell you sentiment. They tell you everything you need to know about the experience the customer just had. But those technologies at the minute within the contact center are typically used for agent coaching and training and QA purposes, which is fantastic. Obviously, we need to do that. But there's a lot more richness in that data that we can and should be looking into to understand what is actually the root cause. Why did this happen? What can we do to fix that? And I think that is a use case that we see a lot more in voice of customer or text analytics platforms that are really built around the idea that we got unstructured data coming in, or we got whatever type of feedback coming in, including unstructured data as well. Let's figure out what is actually the problem here and how can we address the underlying root cause issue. So the technology is actually very similar, but the use cases within the organizations are quite different. So if you are a CX leader wanting to choose or think about which technology to go with, you have to be very clear around what it actually is that you want to do. What is the reason you need that technology? What is the thing you're trying to achieve? And then select the right tech and the right vendor for that as well.
So we've collated the insights. We've found everything. We've analyzed the data. We've been able to come out with some actionable insights. When you and I were chatting, Melanie, one of the things that when we were planning this podcast, you mentioned to me was it's all very good to be able to pull this information out, but you've got to turn it into action. You've got to do something with it. And it almost strikes me that this is where you see a bit of a fork in the road. Some organizations will act on the information and act on the insights, and others don't. So my question to you is, what do you need to do as a stakeholder, as a CX stakeholder, to be able to move the roadblocks out of the way and make sure that the insights do get transformed into action?
Yes, yes, great question, because I think that is really where things tend to fall over when we talk about customer insights. So when we think about customer insights or voice of customer programs in general, we think about 3 stages, which is listen, analyze, act. And sometimes there can have different terminologies for that, but those are pretty much the 3 stages. So we now are a lot better at collecting feedback, listening to our customers, collecting all that feedback. The analyze stage has improved huge due to new technologies that we can now use to help us make sense of the different data sources, but also create a lot richer and higher quality insights through the use of technology. Most organizations are now at the stage where they have great technology, they got lots of data. Most organizations don't have a shortness of customer insights. They have huge amounts of data that they just sit somewhere in a platform, and maybe they have reports and dashboards and Lord knows what. But moving into that next step, which is acting on feedback, that is a really big challenge for organizations. And so when we talk about acting on feedback, again, there are 3 ways of how we can do that. And I think a lot of organizations and CX leaders are still unclear around that there are different types of insights that come through that need to be actioned in different ways, and therefore that needs to be set up differently. So we typically look at tactical, operational, and strategic. So for tactical, that's fairly straightforward. That's what we sometimes call service recovery. Usually that's handled within the contact center. So say somebody, either if it's a survey or it's a call, whatever it might be, customer needs help right then and there. And that goes into the customer service team, and they go back and say, hey, Mr. Customer, really sorry to hear. Well, how can I help, right? So it's just resolving the problem for the customer. But that tactical element, that in that tactical phase, there will never be a root cause analysis or a root cause resolution within there. So we need to think about how, from an operational and strategic perspective, how do we get those insights actioned as well? So if insights come through, for example, if we talk about a new product that was launched, and there's a call coming into the contact center going, hey, I tried this thing and it's broken, or it's not working, or I'm on the website and I can't do this thing. It's one thing for the contact center agent to go, okay, let me just check in and see what's going on, and I'll help you here. The next step then is to go, okay, let's figure out what's actually this broken thing and give it to the teams who are responsible for fixing it. So in the operational phase, or for the operational insights, it's fairly straightforward in the sense that we give it to a particular team or person who's capable of resolving the issue. So if it's a product issue, for example, we give it to the product team, and hopefully they'll be capable of resolving the issue, not just for that one customer, but for all customers in the future as well. But then the last one, that's sort of what we call a strategic insights. They are a lot more difficult to set up and a lot more difficult to tackle, because now we're at a stage where we have something that is systemic in nature. It's a big challenge. It's a large underlying problem that we need to solve. We can't just throw that over to another team and go, hey, it's your job to fix it, because it may need resourcing, prioritization, it needs budget. It typically is something that's really large, needs to go into your business planning process to be resourced and addressed. So there are different ways to actually solve those problems for the customer, but there also, with that comes the challenge of accountability. So if you're an insights team or a contact center team and you go, hey, I just talked to this customer and they got a problem, now you have to go fix it. Do we actually have the culture and the accountability and the processes set up within the business to be ready to go, okay, we got feedback coming from anywhere. Now we still need to find a mechanism to share that feedback and get somebody else to actually fix the underlying root cause issue. So it's not a simple task. And that's why I think there's a lot more to it than just having the right technology or even having the right insights. That acting phase can be quite complex.
Well, there's a lot to chew on here, Melanie, and thank you for giving us your views on this topic. Like I say, I've always been a big believer that customer insights are not something that should be avoided. They should be embraced. And as we take a look at how 2026 is going to play out, obviously, we've got some very uncertain times economically and politically, and being able to not just hang on to a customer, but understand who that customer is, and to be able to really embrace where they are in the life cycle, and to really understand about how better to position products or services to them, I think is going to become more important than ever. And you can only do that with a decent level of robust insights that you can take to the table.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about customer experience, you need to know who your customer is, but you also need to know what the experiences are like for your customers, right? And that's really your insights program is the backbone for your customer experience function. Yeah.
But I'm gonna finish off with a question that I think a lot of people would probably have. There's no two ways about it, Melanie, and I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but in North America and certainly in the UK right now, I track the customer service indices and they're plumbing new depths. I mean, I keep using that expression, but it truly is the case. And I think a lot of consumers are very skeptical with the fact that they fill out a survey after buying something online or after an interaction, or you're asked to do a short survey at the end of a telephone call, and you provide feedback on experiences that perhaps weren't great, but the view is nothing changes. The insights actually going back to your point, they actually have to be actioned. Companies can't just collect this information for the sake of making themselves feel good. You actually have to do something with it. And I think that's going to be the challenge for organizations across the vertical spectrum, no matter the country. If you're going to be mining this information, you've got to actually do something with it.
Yes, absolutely. That's certainly not a problem that's unique to any one country. That's certainly a global phenomenon when we talk about customer experience and customer insights in general. And I think too often we're really hung up on our metrics, NPS, satisfaction, whatever you may use. So we want more and more metrics. Well, they're not going to change if we don't change anything. They're not going to improve if we don't implement the feedback. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect around what the measurement's supposed to be doing. If we don't drive any action, that you won't see any improvement, right? So acting on feedback is still one of the fun challenges to tackle for us in the industry.
Well, I'm very excited by the fact that we're going to hear a lot more of your insights on the CX Outsourcers event this year in Ottawa. Shameless plug for the event happening May 18 to 20th. And we're very lucky that you're going to be traveling all the way from New Zealand to Canada to take part. So we can't wait to see you there. Can't wait to have you in the Northern Hemisphere, in the Great White North, as we like to call this country. But in the meantime, if anybody wants to find out a little bit more about you and what you're up to in the space, how can they track you down?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, firstly, I very much looking forward to meeting you in person in Canada in May at the conference. I'm very excited to be there. If anyone wants to have a chat with me, I'm on LinkedIn, Melanie Disse on LinkedIn, and we also have a website, melaniedisseconsulting.com. So pop it in Google or check out the website, look me up on LinkedIn, more than happy to connect.
Wonderful. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you in Canada. But certainly, this has been a very insightful podcast, and cannot wait to get it out to our listeners from around the world.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.